Access to Rights program was designed to assist grassroots communities to understand their rights, opportunities and responsibilities. The program focused on legal and human rights education, accountability of decentralized and devolved funds, judicial reforms, community paralegals, and policy advocacy work. The final outcome was an empowered community with the ability to know and exercise their rights.
UNDP has, as part of its mandate, the responsibilities of supporting governance in general, but governance also in its various forms, be it electoral, be it supporting access to rights, but also be it supporting judicial reform. So we do have a strong mandate.
To make this a reality, the United Nations Development Programme, through its governance programme, and the Embassy of Sweden, through SIDA, Swedish International Development Agency, teamed up with 6 organizations who jointly implemented the program. These organizations were Action Aid International Kenya, the Center for Law and Research International, the Kenya section of the International Commission of Jurists, Kenya Human Rights Commission, Kituo cha Sheria, and lastly, the Legal Resources Foundation Trust. All these organizations played a significant role in the successful implementation of the program. The program was able to bring about positive changes at grassroots level in the legislation and reform in institutions such as the judiciary. This was a departure from common practice that saw most of programs implemented at national level with very little impact at community level. This empowers the citizens and enables the voiceless to exercise their rights.
If we look at the way the civil society in Kenya has been very vibrant in helping the voiceless, the voice of the voiceless to be heard. And if you look at the way that citizens at local level have been demanding for their rights, I would say that this is one of the best outcomes of the access to rights.
The Legal Resources Foundation Trust played an important role in promoting access to justice for the poor and marginalized. Through the program, community paralegals have been trained in basic legal skills, proposal writing, and fundraising. In addition, community resource centers have been established. Community members use these resource centers to access information on areas such as child rights, inheritance, and land disputes.
The other way in which we have been doing that, approaching them, is using the paralegals that we trained, who then became chiefs, as an entry point, because they understand where LRF is coming from, they understand the mandate of the institution, and therefore they are able to think through how, now that I'm on the other side of the provincial administration as a paralegal, what are some of the green lights that the institution can use, so that as a paralegal and as a provincial administrator, I'm able to understand my roles and balance between my role also as a paralegal.
The trained paralegals work closely with the police, provincial administration, judiciary, and the prisons department.
Well, we recognize paralegals. It is a system that is now in Kenya. We involve them in these minor domestic frictions, probably because these problems may be caused by ignorance. But once they are educated and each and every person gets to know the rights, the wife's rights, the children's rights, the husband's rights, then you'll find the problem will automatically solve itself.
The program covered Mwala, Kangundo, Masinga, and Yatta constituencies in Machakos County. ActionAid works with the poor and marginalized to eradicate poverty. Through the Access to Rights program, ActionAid implemented its People's Participation Towards Equity project in 23 districts around the country. The project aimed at stimulating national public participation in the formulation of national policy.
One way of being able to influence factors of inequality on the ground is to ensure that resources are distributed in a very good way. And at the initial stage, even though there are areas where we had communities advocating for how resources need to be influenced, there are other areas where we were actually sitting communities with fund managers and actually planning on the resources. Of course, we had to see how the two models were working together. And over time, we've been able to see very, very good results coming out of the project.
The project has had a noticeable impact on national policy development and community involvement at grassroots level. Through the project, communities were able to demand accountability on devolved funds like constituency development funds and the local authority transfer funds. The community is equally empowered to make decisions on issues that are of interest to them. Centre for Law and Research International, Clarion, focuses on human rights, governance and constitutionalism. Clarion participated in the Access to Rights program through a program called Community Empowerment for the Management of Decentralized Funds. In Kenya, there are over 15 devolved funds that offer financial support to sectors such as health, education and infrastructure.
People ought to know that resources that the government holds belongs to them, and development or access to services is a right. And so by tying access to resources to rights, it makes it possible for people to understand the fact that it is in their interest and in the interest of the government that resources that are meant for development reach the targeted beneficiaries.
Clarion has focused its work on creating an enabling environment for community members to actively participate in the decision-making process on the usage of these funds, and has done so by empowering communities, enabling them to make decisions on where the funds should be used. This was done through community action planning.
The school was prioritized. For one, we have been told by the head teacher that the school actually is central to 4 primary schools, that one of them is more than 9 kilometers far from the schools, and the other is about 26 kilometers. So the first need that actually driven us to initiate this secondary school is the distance, and we wanted at least a day school that can house the pupils.
Through the Access to Rights program, Clarion worked with community members in Narok and Vihiga districts to identify their needs and develop action plans for their actualization. The program has therefore enabled the community to realize their dreams.
We started on the ground, nothing was seen or heard. We went to the council, and in our off and on in the council, we got resistance. We were sometimes neglected. We were looked upon as though we don't know what we are driving at. But by and by, we were welcomed. So in the council, we found out that 2008-2009, funds were allocated in our ward 420,000 to buy equipment in the hospitals. And yet this fund, the money was still lying in the council. Then we came back to the health facilities. We found that even themselves, although they had written the proposal, they had no idea that their money is in the council. We went further to the community or the public, telling them our money is there lying there. What do we do? So it's when we started coming together, doing awareness, advocacy, until the time now the equipments were delivered in the hospitals.
Kituo cha Sheria is one of the oldest legal aid institutions in the country that undertakes public interest litigation for the poor and marginalized.
working with the UNDP and in the communities, we were able to get so many issues which the community needed to address in investigation bit. We had this public investigation coming out of the work we did in the community. It's because of involvement of this funding from UNDP and going to the community, we were able to dig out and know what issues we needed to address.
Through the Access to Rights program, the organization trained paralegals and supported the formation of community networks that provided the paralegals an entry point into the community. Kituo also helped community members establish 5 community justice centers in Nyando, Kibera, Kamukunji, Kisauni and Shimolatewa prison in Mombasa. In addition, over 120 paralegals working in these centers received ongoing training on human rights monitoring and reporting.
Started empowering inmates with the basic legal advice. And we started providing link between the courts and other institutions which would intervene to make sure that justice is done. We started preparing basic legal documents like applications to court, and we started referring deep for court matters to relevant authorities. Within a period of 1 year, we had a significant impact. We had about 400 appeals were all acquitted.
Kituo cha Sheria also carried out advocacy and policy activities, including contributing to the constitutional review process on the inclusion of the rights of the minority and indigenous people. Kituo is also supporting the Muthurwa residents in Nairobi with 2 landmark cases on the right to adequate housing.
I think before the government issues a notice of eviction, it should do some quantitative and qualitative research on the impact of the eviction, if it is to happen, and see if they are to evict their citizens. They should have an alternative land somewhere, and this land should be habitable, where they should have enough time to discuss with the community people, avail to them the outcome of the research. They sit and agree together that we need this land. Now this is the government. We need this land, this is public space, we need to develop it, because if we develop it, this is what will come out of it. Even you who is living here will get employment out of what we will develop here, and we are going to relocate you to this place.
The Kenya Human Rights Commission protects and promotes human rights for all individuals and groups in Kenya. Through the Access to Rights program, the organization has promoted awareness on gender inequality and trained community leaders to advocate for gender and human rights issues in their communities.
A lot of our work now is through partnerships with organized community-based groups. So right now we partner with communities on a longer period of time, and the communities that we partner with are human rights networks. We call them community-based human rights networks, or HURINETs. And these HURINETs really are the ones that do most of the work. Our main role is to build their capacity in a big way so that they are the face of the human rights advocacy that they are conducting. So that it's not so much that you'll see Kenya Human Rights Commission itself, but you will see the community networks that we work with, which I think a lot of that has succeeded, because recently in Mombasa we had a land dispute on Gungombe, and mainly the people who saw at the forefront of that advocacy were the Mombasa Human Rights Network and not ourselves. But of course we did a lot of supportive work there.
One of the notable successes of Kenya Human Rights Commission's people's approach to human rights work has been the growing autonomy of human rights networks. The Access to Rights program contributed to the core elements of the organization's work in civic action, advocacy, research, and documentation.
We go to schools We have open talks with the children. The children give out their problems. They tell us what they face in the schools, at home. Even when you have parents' meetings, we also give them that opportunity, and parents come up with the problems they face.
Taveta district is just one area in Kenya that has benefited immensely from the KNHRC, where the program addressed issues in relation to child rights, gender and land.
If the government has bought land to settle squatters, it has to be seen to be settled in squatters. I have talked to squatters and they are giving me a list of names which I'll forward to the government. And again, I'll need an audit. We are championing to have an audit, land audit, especially the settlement scheme audit and the council audit, to be done to verify who actually is and has benefited the settlement land and even the town council land, to make sure that the genuine squatters get land and the landless.
ICJ Kenya is a non-partisan, jurist-based membership organization that promotes the adoption of systems that foster democratic governance, the rule of law, and respect for human rights.
My mission is to promote the promotion of rule of law, human rights, and democracy. And our vision is to enhance the space of democratization, access to human rights, and to focus also on rule of law issues.
Through the Access to Rights program, ICJ Kenya conducted a comprehensive audit of the linkages between the administration of justice and the realization of MDGs in Kenya. ICJ also carried out policy and advocacy activities. The most notable one was the participation in the review of the Draft Judicial Service Commission and the vetting of Judges and Magistrates Bill.
We were able to recruit community paralegals and give them diverse training on international human rights practice and rule of law, and I'll therefore allow those communities to have focal points in which they could then, pursue their rights.
A certain company, I don't know where it was from, came and went to my shamba, started drilling a borehole without my consent. So as I was walking to my home, thinking what am I going to do next, then something clicked into my brain. Then I entered this office. I was trying to see whether they could assist me.
Through these activities, members of the judiciary have a more sophisticated and practical understanding of the relationship between their professional decisions and the country's ability to achieve the MDGs. The program has indeed made an important contribution to the changes taking place in Kenya now. With a new constitution in place, the challenge of implementing it will need concerted effort. Social and economic rights enshrined in the Constitution are actually realized. This calls on institutional reforms in key sectors of the country. Citizen empowerment and participation needs to be emphasized and supported.
The definition of development is very much linked to human rights. So human rights is part of the definition of development. So if you want to measure successful development, you must measure how have people's rights been facilitated. But I think the organizations that we have supported in Nairobi has done a very good job in creating awareness around human rights. It's more a long way to go, I think. And the challenge for the human rights organizations is to work more with organizations that work on social, economic and cultural rights.